So Democrats scored some decisive victories in key races around the country, including a historic win for 34-year-old Zohran Mamdani, the next mayor of New York City. Speaking to ABC's Good Morning America, the mayor-elect talked about his goals now to bring the change that the voters responded to during his campaign.
I think there are a lot of voters for whom the trust comes from the actions that you actually take. Many have have understandably been disappointed by politics and the promises that have been made by many before me. Now my opportunity is actually to deliver.
So his race was not the only one, of course. And I have with me on the line breaking news reporter with The Hill, Ashleigh Fields. Hey, Ashleigh, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Can you run down what happened on the East Coast?
Yes, Democrats won in a number of states and cities, starting off with Mamdani, who in his victory speech credited immigrants and working-class Americans in the city for his win. We saw Mickey Sherrill win for governor in New Jersey, and then also Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. And so mainly we're noting that Democrats made inroads with voters ages 18 to 29, and they're hoping to do the same thing next year in midterm elections with this momentum.
So were any of these races particularly close?
I would say the closest race would be in New Jersey. There was a lot of support from President Trump, who was weighing in on behalf of Jack Ciattarelli. However, each of the Republican candidates conceded last night and credited the victors in the races.
So what issues did these candidates focus on? Did all of them in those different states, did they focus on the same thing, or were they focused on other things?
There were a number of issues. I would say Spanberger in Virginia heavily focused on women's reproductive rights, and last night in her victory speech noted that it's one of the only states in the South that has not overturned abortion rights for women, and so that's something that she says she looks to continue to ensure is protected in her administration. She also said she would look to lower costs and protect federal workers, which was a huge issue as we saw Trump administration layoffs earlier this year. Sherrill said sort of the same thing in New Jersey, lowering costs for Americans, whether that be with health care or just strengthening the economy. And Mamdani, of course, said the same thing. One of his main factors on the campaign was creating city-run grocery stores, rent freezes, and free childcare for all.
So is he going to actually be able to deliver on some of those campaign promises, do you think?
Well, as we know, he served as a New York assemblyman, and so he said that there are some things he can enact as mayor, which would be a council of people who determine whether or not the city sees rent freezes. And so he'd be responsible for appointing people who oversee that. So Mamdani seems pretty confident that this could happen as he, heads into his mayorship.
Yeah, interesting. What do you think this means for President Trump, especially looking at 2026?
Well, President Trump, again, is looking to maintain a majority in the House, and so he's really probably going to ramp up his commentary on midterm election races, possibly, doing more to back candidates, might even head out on the campaign trail. We also know that he's going to be, working with these leaders of these states as he continues to enact policies across the country, continues to, quell crime, which seems to be a huge issue for him while working in the White House.
Just to pivot to the West Coast, so in California, Proposition 50 passed, and that was the one where voters were weighing in on this redistricting issue, so giving potentially 5 more Democratic seats to counter, I guess, the 5 seats in Texas. Do you think there will be ongoing efforts to redistrict? Feels like we're running up against deadline where candidates are going to have to start declaring. Do you think there will still be additional states that are going to look at redistricting?
Yes, we already know that redistricting or efforts towards redistricting have been approved in California and Ohio. Now we're looking to see whether or not Missouri or Kentucky does the same thing. These are other states that have shared their interest in making sure congressional maps are redrawn. And so this seems to be the new proponent ahead of midterm elections, whether it's in favor of the Democratic or Republican Party, as they look to pick up the majority in this next cycle.
So, Ashleigh, I want to play a little soundbite. This is in Texas. So President Trump wasn't the only one to weigh in on New York, right? So we're going to hear from ABC's Jim Ryan.
I think there are a lot of voters for whom the trust comes from the actions that you actually take. Many have have understandably been disappointed by politics and the promises that have been made by many before me. Now my opportunity is actually to deliver.
We have a different soundbite. First,
taking a cue from his political mentor, Donald Trump, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has vowed to impose a 100% tariff on anyone moving from New York City to Texas. After Zohran Mamdani was declared winner of the city's mayoral election, Abbott posted again, "Join me for a moment of silence for NYC." Abbott has not said how his threatened tariff would actually work.
Anyway, so you have a governor of a state saying he's going to impose a 100% tariff on anybody who moves there. Can he even do that?
We shall see. I mean, Abbott has been a proponent of being sort of embattled with New York, especially as, New York doctors have been sending abortion medicine to the state of Texas. And so it seems like they've been in this sort of testy relationship that might continue with his comments from last night.
So, look, with your experience watching politics, how would this be implemented? Like, how would he apply a 100% tariff on people who move into the state?
I'm not sure. I would have to look to the future to see how he sort of works to implement this policy. It's definitely something I think would be unprecedented.
Yeah, I'm wondering, what do you say? Okay, we're going to double the taxes on your house, or I just don't see how that would work. So,
right.
Was there anything nationally that maybe surprised you as you were watching election results last night?
I mean, just, harping back off of Abbott's comments, there was a lot of pushback from the Republican Party, especially with Mamdani and his policies that aim to create sort of this economic freedom for New Yorkers. We saw today that Republicans hit back with an ad blitz against Mamdani. Marjorie Taylor Greene has spoken out against him, and also House Speaker Mike Johnson has said that this is an extremist agenda and has tied House Democrats to some of Mamdani's measures. We've also seen House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries sort of distance himself from Mamdani, saying that he's not the future of the Democratic Party. And so it's very interesting to see a lot of people sort of back away from Mamdani despite the support he's receiving in the Big Apple.
Yeah, that is interesting. So thank you so much for joining me. That was breaking news reporter with The Hill, Ashleigh Fields. So there, again, as I'm looking at election results that came in last night from across the country, there was, I think, quite a strong message being sent that Democrats, the message was well received by their voters. And I know in Virginia, there were all counties in the state of Virginia moved further towards the Democrats. They all went more blue. And we will see if those national results, if that is a early indicator of what might happen in the 2026 midterm elections. We've been talking about election results all show, and it was a big night for Democrats coast to coast. In the two races for governor that we talked about earlier, ABC News national correspondent Stephen Portnoy took a look at how the winners did versus the presidential election last year.
In several areas that President Trump carried or made it close just a year ago, the winds have shifted, with Democratic gubernatorial candidate Mikey Sherrill winning in the northern and southern New Jersey suburbs, and Abigail Spanberger strongly outperforming Kamala Harris in northern Virginia. Exit polls in both states showed voters greatly concerned about the economy and giving President Trump poor marks for his job performance. Congressional Republicans may see these results as a warning sign ahead of next year's midterm elections.
So one of the things that I noted, too, was that every county in Virginia shifted more towards the Democrats. They got bluer after last night's election. So I have with me on the line Jason Perry, guru of Utah politics. He's the vice president for government relations and the director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics at the University of Utah. Thanks for joining me, Jason.
Always, Holly. Great to be with you.
Hey, so tell me, what's your take? What's your take on this national story?
Well, it's so interesting. The outcomes are interesting, and what you just said was exactly right. In various places around the country, you got them, New Jersey, Virginia, Georgia. We saw a step to the left in a lot of those particular places, on the municipal side and all the way up to the governors, which is interesting. But what's interesting to me is sort of the messaging that seemed to resonate a little bit as well. And it was a different message than what we saw in the presidential election. There, and Holly, you and I have talked about this in the past. What was interesting was when you talked about the top priorities for the Republicans and the top priorities for the Democrats, there was not a lot of overlap at the time. And so what's clear is the Democrats reclaimed some of these issues for this race. It was less about democracy is about to be destroyed and a little bit more about the economy, a little more about the shutdown, a little bit about how we're affording things in our everyday life. That's an interesting messaging shift.
So it reminds me of the catchphrase that was used by Bill Clinton's political strategist. It's the economy, stupid. Are we back to focusing on that?
Well, I think that's exactly what's happened. And if you look at the last election cycle, and a good portion of the country took a step to the right. So what's coming back a little bit, I think, is a result of that new messaging. A lot of the sort of campaigning on social issues that happened in the last presidential election didn't happen this time. And I think you're right, Holly. People are looking at a government shutdown. A bunch of parts of the country are definitely impacted by not getting paychecks. Inflation still remains high. And so the Democrats sort of pivoting back to that message like they have done in the past seems to have helped.
Let me ask you this. We talked earlier in this show about the shutdown and its impacts, and that President Trump this morning is he's kind of demanding that Republicans in the Senate do away with the filibuster or else they're going to keep on losing, is what he said. What are your feelings about the filibuster, and if there's any appetite in the Senate for that?
So I don't think that there really is. It's talked about regularly. Whoever's in power in the White House talks about this, but this is one of those principles right now that no one has been willing to get rid of, even though it's back after this last election cycle. But it brings up a good point that you mentioned, too, about President Trump weighing in. That's one of those things. But he also has weighed in directly on the results of this election, noting one really true point, which was he wasn't on the ballot. So what happens to races when he is not on the ballot? And I think that these two items are connected a little bit, because he's trying to say that there are issues beyond his office that impacted the outcomes, and maybe there's still opportunity for him and for the Republican Party. But that's one of them, because he mentioned the shutdown, and that's closely connected to the filibuster discussion.
Yeah, and President Trump's not going to be on the ballot again, despite some people saying, well, yeah, he'll run in 2028. He will not. But
no.
But I'm also seeing, I saw this in the Washington Post, and I asked Cami Mondo, who reports for the Deseret News, about this, and she confirmed it, that there's a discussion going on about whether furloughed workers, so the ones who are not considered essential workers, if they will actually get their back pay. And there's conversations going on right now in D.C. saying they will not. So basically, they've been put on unpaid leave, and they may not get that back. How do you think that's going to impact elections?
Well, it will have an impact. And there's one item that seems to transcend almost any opinion about other social issues or other campaign issues, and that's whether or not you can feed your family. That's one of those things that just shows up at the ballot box every single time. When you're trying to figure out what candidate you are going to support, you can overlook a lot of things if you feel like you're going to be able to provide for your family. And if what happens right now maybe proves that one point of what President Trump was saying, is the shutdown might not just have had an impact on this election, but in elections going forward. People don't forget when they worked and didn't get paid, or lost job and didn't get paid. That's something you tend to remember.
Yeah, in fact, typically we like to say that voters don't have a super long memory, and it's a year before we have the midterm elections. But what I hear you saying is you think this can translate over and really impact the 2026 elections as well.
So I think it could, because this is just so deeply personal. Your ability to provide for your family, for yourself, that is something you don't forget. But it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch, to see who can most effectively lay blame. It's not clear right now that you could say that issue, which I do think will not be forgotten as quickly. Particularly, we have a couple things now always referred to so far as the longest shutdown in history. People didn't get paid for the first time after one of these shutdowns. And who's to blame? That will be the big game through this next election cycle.
Let me ask you this question about Texas. So Texas Governor Abbott said that he was going to impose a 100% tariff on anybody who moved from New York City to Texas. And it kind of makes me laugh, but at the same time, it's like, can he actually do that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how he would do that, Holly.
I don't know how he would either.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he would have to put in place to make that happen. I think there's just politics at play right there, trying to to show what values in one state are not welcome in another state. But I think it's all you can take from that.
All right. One quick last question: do you have any insights into the Utah elections that happened yesterday?
Well, so a lot of more moderate candidates won. That's my observation. Is you may have had a small shift left in some parts of the country, but you have a lot of moderate candidates that won, which may be an indication of where Utah is as well.